Well, hello. I'm going to be talking some Star Trek today. I'm probably going to be doing it solo and got some topics here. I'm just going to get straight into them. One of the things that Star Trek shows us is that it's sort of like a post scarcity world, right? So is the Federation truly post scarcity, or is it just a form of propaganda for the core world? We see colonists struggling, resources being fought over, and trade existing. How does the Federation economy actually work? Where do the raw materials for a starship come from if nobody is working for money? Now, by the way, what I'm doing is I'm scraping Reddit posts, um, on the Star Trek subreddit, and I'm just finding interesting questions and just giving my take. So this idea that the Federation is post scarcity um, is really a utopian idea, and I think that it's one thing to say, "Oh, this is what I think's going to happen in the future," and to imagine that, well, we just want to explore because all of our problems that we deal with today in our own world and back in the 60s when Roddenberry created Star Trek is sort of nice, but when you think about it, it doesn't really make for that interesting of a show because if there's no scarcity, then you're left with plots that are just, hey, let's just go to a planet, have some sort of evil alien on it that we have to deal with, or that we put the crew in peril and then find them get out of peril. And I think that once we got into the next generation, and then especially with Deep Space Nine, they were like, well, we have to introduce conflict. And the best way to introduce conflict on a space station is to have them fighting over resources. So I think that that sort of maybe got retconned in a little bit. All right. Starfleet's mental health crisis. All right. So found this one on Reddit. The crews of these ships and stations witness horrifying, universe altering events on a weekly basis. A week later, they seem fine. Was Counselor Troy's role sufficient? All right. So, well, obviously, if they're fine a week later, Counselor Troy must be doing wonderful work. Again, I think it comes down to this is a TV show, everybody. Um, Also, I think that if you are, if you sign up to be on these types of missions in space, it's kind of like what you're signing up for. Um, is anybody really prepared to witness horrifying things? People do all the time, and whether or not they're equipped to deal with it, they are left to deal with it. I do think that something like forget about the inner light for a second. Let's just think about O'Brien, the chief on DS9, being in the episode Hard Time, he's given 20 years in prison. That I think he undergoes that entire 20-year sentence with implanted memories. So for everybody else, it seems like he's been gone for a day, but for him, it's been 20 years. And they do deal with him sort of dealing with the consequences of that. But by the next week, they don't bring it up again. And for the most part, I thought Deep Space Nine did a good job of remembering people's trauma and bringing it up later. But not so much with that. It was sort of was a standalone episode. Um, what about the Colony of the Week disaster? So here we go. Why are so many Federation colonies on the brink of failure, getting wiped out by crystalline entities, or breaking Federation law? Is the Federation bad at colonial administration, or is settling the frontier just that difficult? All right. So, two things. First of all, there could have been plenty of time on the ship that just didn't warrant an episode. Okay, so many episodes might be about colonies in peril because when colonies are in peril, it warrants an episode. You could think of it that way. Also, I do think being on the frontier of anything is always dangerous. I don't think it's because the Federation did a bad job of setting up colonies. So here we go. So this was someone talking about the sound. Um, they said, do you think the sound on Star Trek is consistent? On the TOS bridge, there are whistles and beeps, and on the Enterprise D, I guess TNG, there's an ambient hum, and it's calm. How do you think the sound effects of weapons, doors, and computers establish the tone of each series? Well, I think it has to do with the time period that they were shot in, right? So we're going from the 60s, which came from the 50s. Genre of sci-fi, which was all bing, 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 pew, pew. And then and then they transitioned through the 70s with Star Wars, and obviously the movies that came from Star Wars into the mid 80s. By the time it's the mid late 80s, they probably chose deliberately to get sounds that were um, different than TOS just because, hey, it's the next generation, right? I think it's 100 years later. And I think I think they did a good job with that because if the sound was exactly the same, it would have sounded like a 60s TV show. And I think that that would have broken immersion. Um, let's see, what else? Compare the sets. The bridge of the Kirk's Enterprise was a stage meant for dramatic speeches. The Enterprise, this actually is a comment on Reddit answering about why the aesthetic was different. The Enterprise D bridge was a conference room or a living room, emphasizing diplomacy. The DS9 Operations Center was a bustling command hub for war and trade. Which set design was most effective for its show's mission? I think if I'm comparing TOS and TNG, let's just start there. TOS, in my opinion, the original series was shot to put an emphasis on Kirk and Spock, whereas TNG always had a wide shot, always had that wide shot, like let's say from the view screen looking towards the bridge, where you could see very clearly the entire crew of the bridge crew. And I think that that was purposely done. Although there were some shots on TOS of the entire bridge, it wasn't really emphasized. Um, so I think that that was a deliberate choice in the 80s to make sure that it was more of an ensemble cast for the next generation as opposed to a couple of stars on the original series. And the way they shot the bridge, I think, definitely showed that. Um, so this was, from the absurd uh, side. What is the worst job in Starfleet? All right. So, besides being a red shirt, all right, what would be the worst job in Starfleet? And to me, I guess you could go, cleaning out the toilets, the sonic toilets, or something like that. But um, I think that it would be somebody who had a very, to me, mundane job, right? So, maybe somebody who all you did all day was program the food replicators. All right. And that might be a fulfilling job to somebody, but to me, like to be on a starship and you're there just to like, oh, I ordered steak, but meatloaf's coming out. Can you do something about this? Just going in and playing with the electronics seems like that would be the worst job in Starfleet. Um, an animal-free future. Besides Data's cat Spot and Porthos on Enterprise, there are very few pets or animals shown. Where are they? Is the Federation a pet-free society, Did the transporter make owning an animal impractical? So again, I think this is a TV thing. I mean, like if Data could have Spot, why didn't everybody have a pet? You know, and then by the time we did Enterprise, first of all, we're going into that's like the first Federation ship, right? So pets might have been, that might have been their point for Archer to bring Porthos along to show that it's not that it was new. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think like if we just look at the Navy, I don't think, and I could be wrong. I was never in the Navy. Um, I don't think that servicemen can bring their pets along on naval ships. So it would stand to reason that the starship would be the same, although they don't necessarily bring their children, and a starship like the Enterprise is something that people can bring their children on. So why not pets? That's a good question. So that's gonna end it for now, and we'll be seeing you in the future. Awkwardly looks at where to stop, and here we go.